Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching this stream on YouTube or on Rumble. And I hope that yesterday was Monday, right? Yes, yesterday was Monday. So I received a note or commentary saying that I should mention what day we are at the beginning of the stream. Today is Tuesday, 17th of December. And yesterday on the 16th, I was on Judge Napolitano's YouTube channel, Judging for Freedom. And I hope that you were able to watch the conversation and you liked it. I was very happy to be with Judge on his YouTube channel. I look up to him and I was humbled and honored to be on his show. And I was very happy to read the comments under the video and under the conversation. This is something that I feel it's a fuel for me when I see people are happy with my commentary analysis or even criticizing me. There were many people criticizing my analysis as well, and some of which were very legit concerns or legit commentaries, and I don't mind them at all as long as somebody is not personalizing the discussion. I'm all open for criticism, so I would like to thank you all for those who watched this stream and for those who commented, whether a compliment or a criticism. At the end of this stream, I'm going to tell you how many tons of gold Assad evacuated with him to Moscow. And so if you're interested, you should stay to the end of this stream. In any ways, today we're going to speak about multiple issues going on at the current moment in Syria, one of which is the comments of Syrians who do not like the so-called Syrian revolution and do not like the outcome of this war. And I think that these voices are very valid and we have to listen to them, because nowadays people think in a very binary way. I'm not saying everyone, but many people, especially on social media platforms, think very binary. And if you criticize what the HTS, Jolani, and his militants and also the so-called officials are doing in Syria, then you're an Assadist. Like, there is nothing in between, right? So it seems that I'm going to be called for a Assadist for criticizing HTS, Jolani, and his government in Damascus. But I can assure you that I will never stop. And I hope that when I'm still alive, I would see Syria back again to normality, because what's happening is not normal. And I'm going to tell you a few things that are going on in Syria nowadays that are not normal. Yesterday, again, this was Monday, 16th of December, a woman, a Syrian, Armenian woman, was cooking food. This is a real story. So this person told me this story. So this woman was cooking food in her kitchen, and all of a sudden, a group of militants break into her house. And she was very scared and terrified. And she sees a group of men in front of her, all carrying weapons and speaking Arabic and other language. And the first reaction that this woman does, she takes a sharp, something to cover her hair, to give them the impression that she is a Muslim. And they start talking to her and they say, is this the home of, they give a name. And she says, no, this is not the house of this person. So apparently they were looking for the house of a wealthy, rich businessman in Aleppo. So they broke into the house of another family, thinking that this is the house of that rich person. So they were either trying to loot the house or they were going to arrest or detain this person. In any ways, the woman says, this is not the house, you're in the wrong place. And then her hubby, he wakes up, he was sleeping in the upstairs, and he comes down and they tell him, so if you know where is the house of this person, then you have to come with us for the father or for the husband and tell us where the house of that businessman is. And the person says, look, we just came from Armenia a few weeks ago, And just to give you more context, this person, this family, they used to live in Nagorno-Karabakh, in the independent Armenian enclave of Karabakh, which was ethnically cleansed by Azerbaijan in 2023, and they were forced to leave. Basically, they were Syrian Armenians. They moved to Armenia. They went to Nagorno-Karabakh, and from Nagorno-Karabakh, they were ethnically cleansed and back to Armenia. They didn't want to stay in Armenia. They thought of going back to their birthplace, Aleppo. And now these militants came after them in their own apartment. So these things are happening in Syria. And one of the places that is happening a lot is in Latakia. And today our friend Madonna, she's also a Syrian Armenian from Latakia. She's out of Syria at the current moment. She says the security situation in Latakia is rapidly deteriorating, and the widespread dismissal of people's fears is quite disturbing. How many more isolated incidents need to take place? So there are many missing people in Latakia. And this HTS, they have asked the former Syrian soldiers to give up their arms, and they gave up their arms, and some of these men have been abducted and taken away. Nobody knows where are they. And there are also raids on some villages inhabited by the Alawites or the Christians. They are looting and they are killing. There are two Orthodox Christians, been a couple, a man and a woman. They were murdered by these HTS militants just a few days ago in a place called Wadi Nasara. Wadi Nasara is an area in, I believe it's in Homs, and mostly populated by the Christians. And this was raided. It seems they were trying to rob the place, and after some resistance, they got killed. But one of them was decapitated. So this is the report by our friend Paul Antonopoulos, in his Greek citytimes.com. So this is the report he published. 2 Greek Orthodox Christians were brutally murdered in the village of Jamasliya in Syria's Wadi al-Nasara Valley of the Christians. Although reported as burglary gone wrong, Sam'an Satme was beheaded and Helena Khashouf was shot to death. So the man was decapitated and the woman was shot to death. I don't know if this was motivated by religious hatred or they tried to kill, to rob, but in any ways, decapitation, in my opinion, indicates that there was some hate crime going on here as well. I'm not saying that this is widespread everywhere, but if we care about human rights, as the revolutionaries claim that they wanted to oust Assad in order to bring democratic rule and respect for human rights, then they have to accept my criticism when I speak about these violations of human rights by the HTS militants. And the HTS militants, of up to 30% of them are foreign militants. So they're not Syrians. They don't care about the Syrian people. And they came to Syria for quote-unquote jihad against the infidel Assad regime. This is how they said. This is why they came. This was their motivation. So now Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, the de facto ruler of Syria, he says the following about these foreign mercenaries, militants. He says he will consider granting Syrian citizenship to foreign militants in HTS. Jolani says foreign fighters who fought with us deserve to be honored. So he refers to countries that grant citizenship to those who lived there for several years. I think this is very interesting to see that just right after he conquered Syria, so after unknown civilians lit the passport office on fire. Yes, this was, they burned down the entire passport apartment in Damascus. Basira says this is the Wahhabi version of Zionism. And these people opened my eyes to some new, let's say, perspective. And that is, if anyone who was born in a Jewish family anywhere around the world can come to Israel and get a citizenship, then these HTS and other multinational militants in Syria fighting alongside HTS, they're doing the same thing like the Zionists do. So when I see the arguments of the people supporting this type of action or policy making, that yeah, they came to liberate Syria, why not? We give them their Syrian passport. And this gives me the impression that this is the Islamic version of Zionism. That if you're born Muslim anywhere around the world, and if you come to Syria and you fight alongside HTS or any other Al-Qaeda affiliate groups for a few years, then you could get your Syrian passport. What could go wrong? But this raises more questions and fears than some people may anticipate. Please remember that Idlib, before this invasion on Aleppo, Hama, Homs, Damascus, and basically conquering most of Syria, the United States, they designated Idlib as the biggest safe haven for Al-Qaeda terrorists since 9/11. This was a designation of the US in Idlib. Now, I think that Syria overall is going to become the largest safe haven for Al-Qaeda terrorists around the world. And if that happens, all neighboring countries will be under threat. And this will be a place, a hub for bringing all multinational takfiris from all around the world, settle them in Syria, groom them, equip them, train them, and then send them into missions. So Syria could be a fertile ground for airstrikes, strikes, continuous occupations under the pretext of fighting terrorism. And this is how the US foreign policy functions, basically, that they create a hotspot for terrorism, and then they come and destroy this place and occupy it under the guise of fighting terrorism. So under such circumstances, if these multinational takfiris are going to get Syrian passports, and from the first attempt to threaten any of the neighboring countries, the US will come and intervene and bomb. And if they threaten Israel, this will be seen as an opportunity. Yesterday, I was asked by the judge on his show, Judging for Freedom. He asked me, do you think that HTS could pose a threat on Israel? And I said, Israel sees any sort of threat against its security as an opportunity, not as a problem, because Israel has a superior army, and the experience of the Gaza Strip has proven to everyone that Israel can go to as far as they can, commit all sorts of heinous crimes, crimes against humanity, massacres, and they are accused of committing genocide and ethnic cleansing against the Palestinians, and with no consequences, basically. There is no consequence or any legal consequence against Israel. Put everything aside of ICC and ICJ, because the decisions, arrest warrants, or these legal processes, it's not worth the ink on paper if it's not implemented. And it will not be implemented when it comes to Israel. As long as the US is the superpower, it will not be implemented. And the experience of the Gaza Strip has proven to us that Israel and the United States are ready to go as far as it takes in order to preserve their supremacy over the region, and without consequences. Therefore, at any point, if these HTS militants try to pose any sort of threat against Israel, I'm not saying they will, because Jolani says that they're not interested in fighting against Israel, but let's suppose in the future, HTS doesn't have a big unit of tanks now, or fighter jets, or air defenses, or anti-tanks. They have only few. And Israel already destroyed all of Syria's strategic capabilities. So probably HTS has some pickup trucks and some armored vehicles and few tanks. And they're not going to pose any sort of threat by this type of equipment against Israel. And Israel will be able to hunt them like rabbits, especially after the occupation of Israel to all of the higher hills in Al-Qunaytira area, city. And now Israel has military, intelligence, and logistical it is superior in every aspect over Syria. It can install its spying machinery, technology, satellites, and also Damascus now is 25 kilometers away, so it's in the range of the Israeli artilleries on Damascus. So there is no way for HTS to pose any threat against Israel, even if they want to do it. But this type of excuses could be used in the near future to say that Israel has to expand in Syria and create another buffer zone because HTS is posing a threat against them. And HTS will do nothing about it. HTS is like a good boy of the US and Turkey. When I posted 2 months and 17 days ago, exactly, on my X account, before all these things that happened in Syria, and I said, soon Jolani is going to attack Syrian army positions and he's going to prove himself as the leader of a contract army for the US. And people were like laughing at me in the comments. And around 6 weeks later, he initiated the attack against the Syrian army positions, and he has proven to be the leader of a contract army for the US and Turkey, of course. And anyone who thinks that Turkey and the United States are not in agreement in Syria, he's delusional. The only thing that the US and Turkey disagree is the Kurdish presence, or the Kurdish militias, or the Kurdish independence or autonomy. The rest, they agree on everything. And I'm going to discuss this later in this live streaming. So, because all these things are happening in the country, we have our friend, Syrian girl. She is Syrian, she is a Muslim, she is a Sunni. She says, they didn't learn about regime change after Iraq, they didn't learn after Libya, so why did we expect them to learn after Syria? To learn requires a brain. We are dealing with some of the stupidest people on earth. Our friend Richard Medhurst, Richard says, the amount of foreigners, many of them armed, who talk about freeing Syria and then barge into the country without a visa, without a shred of humility or respect for Syria's sovereignty and borders, are truly so full of it. Fanatics stealing the land in Syria. Sounds familiar? He's referring to the Zionist occupation of Palestine. Amazing how not one of them dares to barge into occupied Palestine with that attitude, but they are so ready to steal Syrian assets and soil and our future when they have literally no connection to the land. This is the same strategy, by the way, that the Zionists use when it comes to conquering more Palestinian territories. And just for you to know, Richard Medhurst is highly likely going to be my guest on Friday. So if you like to see him having a conversation with me, two Syrians talking about what's going on in West Asia, Middle East, Syria, Palestine, make sure to subscribe. And I don't know, there's this notification bell so you don't miss the opportunity to watch him coming for the first time on Syriana Analysis to discuss these cases. Another friend on X, she's her account is Bint Halab, meaning the girl from Aleppo. She's again a Muslim Sunni. She says, I can't describe the amount of rage I feel at seeing foreign terrorists and their supporters like Dili Hussein. Keep this name in mind, guys, because I'm sure many of you were duped by him. Like Dili Hussein praying in Dumayet Mosque and visiting my homeland like it's a free for all, while thousands of Syrian Christians and Shias are fleeing everywhere they ever knew. I don't give a F what people say. Syria is for Syrians. The Uzbeks, Uyghurs, Tajiks, Chechens, Pakistanis, Bengalis, Turks, etc. all have to go. The whole Ummah won't work on me. It's just a Muslim brand of Zionism. I pray to Allah that my people reject this foreign invasion. Not to mention they are praying in our mosques with their shoes and bringing their guns inside. This was never allowed before, and Syrians would never dare to dirty our mosques like that. I mean, this woman is spitting some facts. I'm sorry that I didn't show you the original tweet. This is the original tweet. So this Dili Hussein and many of them, by the way, for those who don't know, this is Dili Hussein. He just met with al-Jawlani. So Dili Hussein, of course, all these British based so-called Muslim influencers, they're sectarian maniacs, right? They hate the Shias with their all guts. They hate the minorities. They hate the Christians with like everything they have in their stomach, basically, which is nothing but hatred. And he says, I attended a meeting with Ahmed al-Shara, Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani today for a question and answer session with Western media. Video of the meeting discussion will be released later today, inshallah. So our friend Syrian girl asks him, were you later interrogated by British anti-terror police, or is that reserved for anyone who is pro-Palestine? That's a very good question, actually. One of our Palestinian friends says Dili Hussein appears to be an Al-Qaeda sympathizer, which makes sense given his history of sectarian bigotry. He is not a journalist. His meeting with Israel's man in Damascus, al-Jawlani, is deeply concerning. There are two things here just I want to mention. One, people like Dili Hussein, they support Al-Qaeda offshoot. And it is accepted now in the British political landscape to be pro-Al-Qaeda. When it's convenient, it is accepted. And people like him will go back to the UK and nothing will happen to them. But if you support the Palestinian armed struggle or the Lebanese armed struggle, then once you land in the UK or you're in the UK, like there were many, many names now. Sometimes I forgot the names, like Sarah Willingson, I think her name, Vanessa Beeley, our friend Richard Medhurst, Kit Klarenberg, many people were stopped in the airport or they were approached in their homes and their electronics were confiscated for supporting terrorism, right? Because basically they were supporting the Palestinian armed struggle. But people like Dili Hussein, they will never be stopped for supporting Al-Qaeda. And I want to go one step further and say, during the peak of ISIS, many hundreds of these takfiris came from European countries to Syria and Iraq, and they joined ISIS. Do you really think that the foreign intelligence of these countries, the UK, Turkey, and European and American intelligence had no clue about them fleeing to Syria to fight alongside ISIS? No, of course they knew. But first, because these people are ready to carry out the fight against Assad back then. And secondly, because they are now exporting this sectarian and terroristic dirt out of their countries. They're basically geopolitical idiots, and they're sending them to Middle Eastern countries to export this problem into other countries. I remember I watched a video reportage on ZDF. In English is ZDF, the German public TV. I think this was 2015, 2016, I'm not sure, but during that time, during the peak of ISIS. And the journalist asked the head of the police department, it's called here in Germany LKA, Landeskriminalamt. It is of Bavaria, so in the southern federal state of Bavaria. And the ZDF journalist asked him, what does he think about traveling? I think there were like 400 Germans or so. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on this. But there were some Germans flying to Syria to join ISIS, basically. So what does he think about it? And he said, I'm paraphrasing him, that they don't mind because they're leaving Germany, and like these terrorists are basically going to other places and causing problems in other countries. So it's making Germany safer, basically, right? Now, the same thing is with HTS. HTS, the leader of HTS, Jawlani, was in ISIS. He was the partner of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. And then they split it, and he formed Al-Nusra Front, the offshoot of Al-Qaeda. Now he's rebranded, and he's the de facto leader of Syria. And all these people, like Dili Hussein and many others who support these terrorists in Syria, they're sectarian bigots. And they, like, for them, Palestine is just like, it's like a front that you can sell your podcast, you can sell your brand, you can sell your reputation, and say, like, you're a genuine person supporting Palestine. Then you do everything that serves Israel. The crumbling of Syria this way, it will serve Israel for decades to come. And nothing will change that. No condemnation, no international law, no UN resolutions. Nothing can change that. Like yesterday, I was reading on the X profile of a Lebanese colleague, basically. I don't want to mention names now, but she said basically something like, you can be anti-Assad and condemn him, and at the same time be anti-HTS and condemn them. And I was like, look, the Assad rule made grave mistakes, but the result of this regime change war will serve Israel for decades to come. And no amount of condemnation will reverse that. So you're condemning HTS or not, it's irrelevant. Because what you need against Israel to immunize yourself from occupation is military force. Like if you don't have a military force to deter Israeli attacks, then Israel is not going to withdraw. Every inch that Israel occupies today in Syria, they will keep it forever. Until an armed resistance is formed and they force Israel to withdraw from Syrian territories, right? Until then, nothing is going to happen. So, excuse me, sometimes I have to check that if there is something important coming to from family or something on my smartphone. So, yeah, you can condemn, criticize Assad as much as you want. Actually, it's legitimate. I'm condemning him now all the time after he fled the country the way he did. But saying that you're happy for the outcome of this war and you're pro-Palestine, there's something wrong with you, definitely. I was talking to my friend today on Zoom call, and we spoke about, this is just a private chat, but nothing is private, let's say, in the discussion. I just want to share with you what we spoke. And he was asking me basically like, why many people who support Palestine support HTS today? And I can't find anything but two reasons. Sectarian bigotry, they hate the Alawites with all their guts, and Assad was an Alawite. They hate the Shias, with extension, they hate Iran. This is a main consideration, in my opinion. And there is also another thing, that is, they will never accept Iran having a leading role in the region, not because they are Shias, but because the Arabs have ruled over the Persians in the past. They will not accept Persian having an upper hand over an Arabic region. Unlike Ottoman Empire or current Turkey, Turkey has ruled over the Arabs for 400 years. And they were subjugated and humiliated, and they were persecuted and massacred. The grandparents of these people now, who are fighting alongside HTS under the Turkish intelligence banner, they're the ones who paid a huge price for resisting against Ottoman Empire in the past. So they're basically betraying their own grandparents' legacy. But it's okay, because the first generation who was persecuted passes over the memories to the second generation. The second generation remembers the sufferings of their parents. And then this second generation tries to pass it over to the third generation. And then in the fourth generation, people forget what happened 100 years ago. This is the Turkish occupation of Syria. And people will realize it when it's too late anyways. So I don't belong to this project. I'm an ethnic Armenian, but I don't come from the position of hatred towards the Turkish people. I have so many Turkish friends, and I'm not like saying this to justify now. We have Turkish guests coming to this show. I've been to Turkey many times as a tourist, as a guest. I have no, I truly don't have hatred in my guts to any person for being born in some nationality or religion. I never come from that position. I treat you the way you treat me. That's it. And with the Turkish people, I have met many secular Turks who say, I accept that the Armenian genocide happened. I have zero problems with them. Our very respected guest, which I love him with the bottom of my heart, Tarek Çivil Amar, he's half Turk. Like, his name is Tarek Çivil Amar anyways. He's, I think his mother is German or father is German, but he's half. So But I come from a place where I remember history and I take lessons from history and I connect the dots. And people are telling me that there are Armenians celebrating the revolution now in takeover of Syria. I mean, there are, in my opinion, two types of Armenian could celebrate this. They are either completely hypocritical and they are afraid of HTS, so they will celebrate it so they won't be persecuted later. Or secondly, they have forgotten their own history. I didn't forget my history. This was just 100 years ago. The Ottoman Empire and the Young Turks government later, they have committed massacres against the Armenians. And they're not going to come and commit similar massacres now against the Armenians or the Christians in Syria. But with giving nationality to these multinational terrorists and bringing all these takfiris as in Syria as if it's a recycle bin and dumping them here, creating a hub for these Al-Qaeda terrorists. Well, how do you think the situation is going to end up in the near future? Then you will say, I can't live among them, and then you will leave your city and town and home again. Armenians were living in Eastern Anatolia, and 1.5 million of them were ethnically cleansed. Only 100 years ago. 2-3 years ago, 1 year ago, 120,000 Armenians were ethnically cleansed from Nagorno-Karabakh by Azerbaijan, supported directly by Turkey, Erdogan, and Israel. The Armenians, if those Armenians forgot about these things, I don't forget. And I'm here telling you what could happen. And in 50 years from now, you will not see a single Armenian or Christian in Aleppo. There might be 1, 2, 3 families or a few hundred. Already 80 to 90% of the Christians migrated or were ethnically cleansed since this regime change war started. Do you really think that the Christians and the Armenians could survive another 50 years living alongside HTS? Is there anything in their minds? I don't understand who are these people? And people telling me that, but look, the Armenians are celebrating, there is this Armenian raising the revolution flag, there is that. I don't care. I don't care what these people think. Because deep inside, I know that HTS, Jolani, Turkey, they don't have the best interests of these people in their hearts. They have the choice, at the end. I'm not like coming and telling them you have to follow what I'm saying, but I'm here, like, I'm someone who studied politics. I studied international relations. I worked in politics for a long time. And I have some very basic, simple approach trying to connect the dots and reading the sequences of events and seeing through these events. Many people do not do these things. And many people are used to consume sensationalist reportages on TV outlets and making up their minds with 50-second, 40-second long videos. This is not how politics work. So, but there are people very awake. There are people who are brilliant. Brian, I love you, man. He brought this screenshot. By the way, this screenshot is from a document sent to the Barack Obama. I think this was in 2011 by the Defense Intelligence Agency of the United States. And these parts which he highlighted, this is what we are going to read now and what it means. Many delusional people in the Middle East and beyond believe HTS, Al-Qaeda, ISIS are heroes fighting Syria's government. They cannot account for why these groups never fight the US or Israel except to claim that Syria is somehow also a top priority for resistance, never accounting for why their objective is identical to Washington's or why US and Israeli warplanes often literally provide the militants air support. They swear their movement is a revolution, sustaining themselves off of war booty taken from Syrian soldiers, as if real war is a G.I. Joe episode. They refuse to explain why their movement flows out of NATO territory, Turkey, and how obviously their logistics do too. When shown US Defense Intelligence Agency documents admitting their heroes are backed by the US fighting for US objectives in the region in order to isolate the Syrian government, they plunge into deep denial, claiming it is fake or taken out of context. Empire grinds on in part because of ignorance and blind ideology, of which HTS, Al-Qaeda, and its supporters have in great abundance. America's primary superweapon is its ability to mass brainwash entire segments of the population. Those who see the truth are tasked with the unenviable job of waking these people up who, like the prisoners in Plato's cave, would sooner kill you than open their eyes to the freedom and truth offered to them. Oh man, this is it. Oh, there is no alternative as long as people are trapped in this fantasy in service of US hegemony. They remain a deadly threat to themselves and all others. This is the document that he's quoting from 2011 when the Defense Intelligence Agency sent to Barack Obama telling him that if the situation unravels, there is the possibility of establishing a declared or undeclared Salafist principality in eastern Syria, Hasaka and Deir ez-Zor, and this is exactly what the supporting powers to the opposition want. In 2011, in order to isolate the Syrian regime, which is considered the strategic depth of the Shia expansion, so they mean the axis of resistance. The Salafists, the Muslim Brotherhood, and Al-Qaeda are the major forces driving the insurgency in Syria. The West, Gulf countries, and Turkey support the opposition, while Russia, China, and Iran support the regime. It's exactly this. Like, sometimes I feel I'm in no way or shape, I don't even consider myself a philosopher and intellectual, because intellectuals could be bought and sold as well. But I feel sometimes like I'm talking to wall. And I'm talking about Syrians, right? I had a massive, big following on Facebook. If I said hi on Facebook, 1,000 likes come, right? And rest assured, out of 100 people, only 10 people put like. The rest just read, they don't put like or something. I had a massive following on Facebook. In the last few weeks, when I used to post analysis of what's happening in Syria, thousands of people were like liking and sharing. I had a massive following on Facebook in Arabic because I used to write in Arabic for the Syrian local people, and I deactivated my account completely because this is exactly how I felt. Like, I'm talking to people who don't want to listen, and if they listen, do not understand, and they want to like sacrifice me and calling me names because I'm trying to open up their eyes. Therefore, I felt like I no longer want to do that. I no longer want to wake up people. If people want to wake up themselves, they can do it. Like how I woke up myself, they can wake up themselves. There are many people say, thank you so much for opening my eyes. Okay, good. This is my YouTube channel. You can follow what I'm saying or what I'm writing. If you don't understand English, come my X account. You can auto-translate my tweets or posts. You can read. But myself going and putting so much effort trying to convince people, especially Arabic-speaking people, about what's happening in the region, despite the fact that, as our friend Mimi Laham, the Syrian girl at the beginning of this show, I quoted her tweet saying, like, if Iraq was not enough, if Libya was not enough to open up eyes, then how do you expect that they will wake up their minds now and eyes now in Syria? And this is something that is happening also with my friends who were close to me in Syria. They were all like in a celebration mode. It's like a time when you are drunk and you're just celebrating, happy, but then the second day when you wake up and it's a hangover, right? It's the headache. This is how the media has created this consent in Syria that this was a liberation. Israel is 25 kilometers away from Damascus. American forces occupying the oil fields. Turkish intelligence is occupying large swaths of territories in Syria under the HTS banner. Right. I'm going to show you a segment of my video now with conversation with Judge Napolitano when I spoke about how Syria lost its sovereignty. And since it's lost its sovereignty to foreign powers, what could happen to Syria next? Take a look.
Is it fair to say that this is not a takeover of the Syrian government? This is a destruction of the country, that in fact Syria exists no longer?
Judge, Syria doesn't have a sovereignty any longer, because if you don't have an army, you no longer have a sovereignty. And if you don't have a sovereignty, then every regional power will meddle in your internal affairs. So this is just basic logic. And on the short run, we will see many, let's say, regional and also Western investments in Syria, and people will start filling their pockets. But this is all, it's going to be momentary. People need to understand that if Syria doesn't have its own national industry, its own technological sector, industrial sector, then they will rely and be dependent on foreign investors. And once the foreign investors invest in your country and they have a grip over the economy, then they control the politicians. And once they control the politicians, they control the foreign policy of the country. So right. Syria is no longer independent. Syria is under occupation. American occupation, Turkish occupation, Israeli occupation, and even the Russians now on the coast, they have a big influence because they have their navy. So I would argue that Syria lost its sovereignty, and it will take a long time, decades probably, to restore that. Of course, this could go even to worse scenarios if partitions of the projects of partitions of Syria would be materialized. Then Syria will be lost. We're talking about 7,000-year-old civilization, right, which could be killed. So this is not only about political rule; it's the destiny of a country, its civilization. And rest assured, under HTS and these multinational tech theories, they don't appreciate culture and civilization. They have destroyed Syria's civilization and its historical towns and cities. They have sent car bombs, but they have changed now. They have changed, right? This is what they're trying to convince us. This is now Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. They not only rebranded him, they're now meeting with him. This is a delegation from the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office met with HTS leader Abu Muhammad al-Jolani in Damascus. A reminder that HTS is still a proscribed terrorist organization in Britain, and holding such meetings can lead to a jail sentence of up to 14 years. So these pieces of, I don't want to call them more harsher names, they rejected to meet with any Syrian government official in the past because he's a dictator and tyrant, right? But they are meeting with international designated terrorist, and there is a $10 million bounty on his head. So they prefer a former Al-Qaeda terrorist over a dictator, right? This is how they see things. And it's also Kaya Kallas, of course, because the EU has to have its opinion. And look how proud she is. Like, she looks like she's reached to some big successes in her life. Not like she's just ideologically driven and she's a warmonger. That's why and she's a woman, of course. That's why she's in this position. Look what she says. She says, we can't leave a vacuum in Syria. The EU must be present. Like, they all think like Syria is their territory or something. They have to be present everywhere. Like, this is how the imperialist thinks. We have already started with the process to engage cautiously with the new leadership and civil society. So she calls the Assad regime a regime, but then HTS is a leadership, guys, okay? And they will open an EU delegation in Syria soon. And I say, you called Assad rule a regime, but the rule of an internationally designated terror group, including by the EU, by the way, a leadership. It shows everything you need to know. Kim Iverson, leave the Middle East to Middle Easterners and focus on building back your own region of the world. Scott says, Christ, you are pathetic. The EU must be present. I don't think Turkey gives a rat's ass about the EU anymore, and Turkey is calling the shots. Yeah, I think Turkey is calling the shots here. Turkey is the biggest benefactor of this war. And this was asked, I was asked by a judge again yesterday about this case. I'm going to show you that later in this show. How many minutes do I still have? 15 minutes. Good, great, amazing. So I will just try to minimize a few things here. So the title of today's video, right? It's to Donald Trump saying things about Turkey before he comes to power. So Trump says Turkey was behind Islamist groups that toppled Assad in Syria. You don't say. Donald Trump said on Monday that he believed Turkey was behind the rebel group that toppled Syria's dictator Bashar al-Assad, claiming Ankara had mounted an unfriendly takeover of its neighbor. They wanted it for thousands of years, and he got it. Those people who went in are controlled by Turkey, Trump said. Turkey did an unfriendly takeover without a lot of lives being lost. Foreign policy analysts said Trump was sending a message to Erdogan, with whom he has enjoyed a turbulent relationship. Trump has issued a warning of sorts to the new rulers of Syria and their patrons, which is rule carefully because we are watching, said Jonathan Shanza, executive director of the Foundation of Defense of Democracy's think tank. I mean, of course, I'm sure that this is very much credible foundation for democracies anyways. But I think Trump's warning here is about the Kurds. I'm 100% sure that Trump knew about this deal in Syria with the Russians. I'm 100% sure that once Assad flew to Moscow, this was 2-3 weeks ago, and he was told there's a deal in Syria, I'm 100% sure that this deal between Russia, Turkey, and also Russia and the United States included under Trump's supervision. So Trump wanted to finish this before he comes. Then after he comes, he has to manage the conflict now with the Kurds, between Turkey and the Kurds. So let's see what's going to happen with the Kurds at a later stage. But in this, he says, I think Turkey is going to hold the key to Syria. He's correct. Trump's comments about Erdogan reflected the US president-elect's tendency to keep world leaders on their toes, a foreign policy expert says. Ties between Washington and Ankara have improved more recently, according to Turkish officials and Western diplomats, despite some tension triggered by Erdogan's criticism of Israel over its Gaza. I mean, Erdogan's entire criticism about Gaza is just a smokescreen. He has been criticizing Israel for decades, for 3 decades now. And what did he do for the Palestinians? He has given the biggest service to Netanyahu. He has finished on the axis of resistance through this invasion of HTS, and now Iran doesn't have its allies in, doesn't have any sort of supply chains to Hezbollah, doesn't have any connectivity between Lebanon, Palestine, Syria, Iraq, and Iran, and I would argue the axis of resistance is crumbling. And this was done in a matter of few days by Erdogan. So I'm sure Netanyahu is very, very grateful for Erdogan. Turkey also eventually backed Sweden's accession to NATO earlier this year, after which Washington approved Ankara's purchase of American F-16 fighter jet. Now, this is the thing with Erdogan. He's a very good businessman. Like, he opposes things, but he accepts it later when he receives something from the Americans. Turkey has, however, pushed back strongly against Washington's support for the Syrian Democratic Forces, a Kurdish-led group that Ankara considers indistinguishable from separatists that have battled the Turkish state. Washington sees the SDF as a crucial partner in keeping ISIS from significantly reconstituting in Syria in the political vacuum following Assad's fall. So I was asked by Judge Napolitano 2 questions basically about who won and who lost in this war. I would start with this first segment. Let's take a look.
Was the collapse of Syria a strategic defeat for Russia?
Actually, more for Iran, I would argue. The Russians are trying to secure now their navy in Tartus, and in my opinion, they could do it. The Western governments are blackmailing now HTS, saying that we will not lift the sanctions unless you kick out the Russian navy. But the Turkish side cannot go too far against the Russians now. They are still playing two-sidism, especially Erdogan. But the Iranians are the ones who lost the most, because Syria represented the strategic depth of what was called the axis of resistance. Syria represented the supply chains for Hezbollah, and Hezbollah used to deliver the weapons, the knowledge also to the Palestinian factions. And also Syria was the geographical, let's say, access for Palestinian and Hezbollah or Lebanese groups to have this geographical connectivity between Lebanon, Palestine, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Now all these chains are cut. We're talking about like the crumbling of the axis of resistance. And also Iran took one step back and decided that they have to serve their own national interests. So I would argue that the collapse of Syria would be it would be deadly for the axis of resistance more than for Russia. But on the energy sector, yes, now that Qatar can materialize its project of extending gas pipelines through Syria to Turkey, and Turkey could distribute it to Europe, I think this would be also for the future, 50 years from now, 100 years from now. This is how the American planners think, that from now on, the Europeans would never need Russian gas. Not now, not in the future, because Qatar will be the ones supplying them with this gas. So those were the losers. In my opinion, the biggest loser is going to be, of course, Syria as a nation state, then Iran, and to a lesser extent, Russia. But who are the winners of this conflict? Take a look.
Who gains the most from the collapse of Syria?
I think the biggest victor of this is Turkey. And today, President-elect Trump has also mentioned this in his statement, that Erdogan is one of the, he has control now basically over Syria. He controls HTS. I think Turkey will have a big leverage over northern Syria. We're talking about Aleppo, Idlib, and Homs. Damascus will be more in the hands of the Saudis. And in the south, it will be more Israeli, and the Americans in the east with the Kurds, because they are encouraging them to separate from Syria, and they also they occupy 50% of the Syrian.
How can the Kurds possibly? How can the Kurds possibly coexist with the Turks?
That's a very good question. Actually, they cannot, and this is the thing that Trump has to solve in when he comes to the presidency. I think this is a red line for the Turkish side, and they have shown that they're ready to go to war against the Kurds if they are going to declare any sort of independence or federalism in Syria. So this is a recipe for more wars. This is what I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, that trying to divide Syria on ethnic and religious lines, it will create more mayhem in the country than it used to be in the past. Our friend Sam says, how long before the refugees, when they go back to Syria, realize that they are living under the black flag of HTS? My question would be, are they going to go back to Syria? I don't think most of them are going to go back to Syria. The refugees in Turkey and Lebanon, they will be forced to go, as I mentioned previously, but the ones who in Europe, I don't think most of them will do and go back. And they want to see HTS ruling Syria, but they don't want to go and live under HTS. This is my humble opinion about it. So how much money Assad has taken with him outside of Syria, and how much gold he took with him outside of Syria? Now, the claims by the Financial Times, which is, of course, I'm not here defending Assad. Please be wary and careful what I'm saying. But I don't know if the Financial Times is accurate in their estimates, because they say he airlifted around $250 million in cash to Moscow in a 2-year period when so in the past 2 years, they say Assad took $250 million in cash to Moscow. And the Financial Times has uncovered records showing that Assad's regime, while desperately short of foreign currency, flew banknotes weighing nearly 2 tons in $100 bills and $500 notes into Moscow's Vnukovo airport to be deposited at sanctioned Russian banks between 2018 and 2019. The unusual transfers from Damascus underscore how Russia, a crucial ally of Assad that lent him military support to prolong his regime, became one of the most important destinations for Syria's cash as Western sanctions pushed it out of the financial system. Opposition figures and Western governments have accused Assad's regime of looting Syria's wealth and turning to criminal activity to finance the war and its over-enrichment. enrichment. So this is from the Financial Times. We don't know how accurate is this, but the Reuters have another scoop, they say, on this case, which contradicts the first report by the Financial Times. So in the Reuters, they say Syria's central bank has nearly 26 tons of gold in its vault, worth about $2.2 billion at the current price, four sources say. That's the same amount as before the war. Four sources say it was not touched. So Syria had 2.2 billion or 26 tons of gold before the war. And now after Assad left the country and escaped, it's still 2.2 billion or 26 tons of gold still exist in the central bank of Syria. I don't want to say let's hope it won't be looted, because hopes will not protect anything, but something like this, we have seen it before in Libya and Iraq, and their golds were looted. So let's see this time what's going to happen. But dollars reserves has dropped from about 18.5 billion before the war. So before the war, Syria had $18.5 billion in reserves in the central bank, and now it is 200 million. So where is the truth? We don't know. Maybe it's the truth is somewhere in the middle. Maybe both of them are wrong. Maybe both of them are correct. I don't know. But what I know is that the situation is not as bright, as pinky, as balloony, as decorations that the press is trying to put and mask on the situation in Syria. If you're enjoying this live stream, guys, if you're enjoying what I do, my commentaries, my analysis, my research, my opinions, I would encourage you to hit the like button. It's free of charge, of course, and also subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're very close to hitting 90,000 subscribers. That's an amazing number. I was trying to reach 200K before the new year. Maybe you can help me. I don't know. We still have 2 weeks for that. I would really appreciate it if you are not subscriber when you subscribe, or if you would like to send it to your friends so they subscribe as well. It would be amazing gift for me. I think it's unrealistic to reach 100,000 subscribers in 2 weeks, but if you help me, we could reach that number as well. And I'm going to do definitely a live streaming tomorrow, Wednesday, 18th of December at 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. And on Friday, I will have Richard Medhurst on my channel. So if you're looking forward to it, you can hit the notification bell so you don't miss that live streaming as well. But for today, this was everything I wanted to cover to you. Thank you so much for tuning, guys. I really appreciate it. I wish you peace upon you, upon your families, and we will see you tomorrow. Salam.